Hi, friends. I want to welcome you to this special edition of Scott Fox After 9. Today, I've got a very special guest, and it's continuing along a theme that I've been following for the last number of weeks. I'm talking about speed enforcement cameras. So I'm going to bring in a Liberal member of Provincial Parliament, Rob Cerjanec. Did I say that right, Rob?
You got that right, Scott. Nice to be here.
It's really great to have you on. Speed enforcement cameras are something that has come up a lot lately, and for the simple reason that a lot of people got tickets recently and they're not too happy about it. And the province has now come out and said, we're going to get rid of these speed enforcement cameras. But your job is to sit across the legislature from Premier Ford and oppose things like this and to try and poke some holes in the argument. So I want to understand where you're coming from in why you support speed enforcement cameras.
It's not just about opposing or poking holes into what the premier is saying. You mentioned that people are upset with getting tickets, and you know what? I hear them on that. The examples of somebody getting a ticket of 2 or 3 kilometers an hour over, that's ridiculous. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be getting a ticket if you're that little over the speed limit. But it's about making public policy better. It's about making the decisions that government makes better and more responsive to what's going on within society and public. So that's why I'm very happy to talk to you about speed cameras in school zones today.
Okay. Do you think they should be restricted 100% to school zones? Because there's a lot of them in questionable areas where there don't seem to be any schools or homes around there.
Yeah, I think you're right. In some municipalities, I agree with the premier. I've used this as a cash grab. So when I hear people talk to me about that, I understand that. I sympathize with that. If we go back, 30 plus years in Ontario, we had photo radar on highways, and a different government came in and took them out. And I don't really think a government was ever going to bring in photo radars on highway again. We all go over the speed limit every now and then. I get that, but we've got to make sure that we're making decisions that are good. So in 2019, the premier said to municipalities, you can put speed cameras in school zones and other areas. I think we should restrict that to school zones. I think we should look at senior safety zones. And this was an opportunity instead of the premier to come in, with his Superman cape and say, I'm going to save the day from a problem and an issue that he created in the first place. He could have actually taken a step back, listened to the Ontario Association of the Chiefs of Police, listened to the municipalities in Ontario as well, whose authority that they gave to put in speed cameras, and done some consultation and listened to everybody to make sure that it works a lot better. So at first glance, school zones make sense, maybe senior safety zones as well, because we're dealing with vulnerable road users at the end of the day. But there's some roads that are arterial roads. Should a speed camera be on it? No, I don't think it should be.
Okay. Do you think the use of speed cameras should be time limited, only during specific hours? Or is it just across the board? If you're speeding through a neighborhood, you deserve a ticket?
No. I think that's a reasonable position. I think it's something that the government should be considering, and that's why if they did a consultation, if they listened to everyone and then came up with some reasonable changes to the regulations that they put into place, I don't think we'd necessarily be having this conversation right now. It feels like the premier wanted to fly in with his Superman cape and say, "I'm saving the day."
Well, I'm sure that the premier might disagree a little bit on your assessment in that you say municipalities want them. Not all of them do, though, in fairness. And is that okay if a municipality doesn't want to have these on their borders?
I think that's fine, and that's their choice. I think sometimes we see with this provincial government, they tend to meddle a little bit more than typical in the affairs of municipalities. That's why we elect local councils. That's why we elect mayors to make decisions. And you know what? If you don't like the decision that the local council's making or the mayor, vote them out and vote new people in.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying, and certainly that is a pillar of democracy. But one thing I want to understand is how we got to this point, because it seems like these cameras kind of came out of nowhere, and people started getting tickets, and there's not even an option to fight them in most cases. So it seems very arbitrary in how this was laid out by the municipalities, and I do believe that the blame falls on them for a lot of the anger. While the province did authorize it, it seems like some of the municipalities have gone a little too far in putting these things in, and people don't feel like they have a voice. So I think generally speaking, that's where a lot of the praise for Premier Ford is coming from, because they were rammed down people's throats with no consultation from the municipalities either.
I think that approach varied from municipality to municipality. I represent the town of Ajax. So here in Ajax, we have 3 speed cameras, and there's more than 30 school zones within Ajax. and they move those three school cameras only within school zones, every month, because they hear from residents that are in that neighborhood concerned about cars speeding by the school. They hear from parents during pickup and drop off time or other parts of the school day about cars speeding through those school areas. So that's the approach the town of Ajax has taken, which I think is a very reasonable approach. I would say more reasonable than most municipalities. But at the end of the day, the province put in the rules. They said, here is the canvas that you can operate within. And they could have actually now restricted that, and they didn't. So you've got some municipalities, like Brampton, for example, that I think they've spent $50 million on speed cameras and the system and the back end that they need to do that. And they're concerned about this knee-jerk decision by the government. Typically, you see Patrick Brown and the Premier get along very well. I think Patrick Brown's been a little quiet on this one.
Interesting. And that could be for a lot of different reasons. But the money seems to be the one that really gets people because it does burn your butt. A week, 10 days later, you open up the mail and it says you were doing something a week ago, and it gives you a big fine for that. And is the fine amount fair, do you think? And is it right to send somebody a ticket a week after they've committed an offense here in this particular case? And especially given that the point of them is to slow people down now.
Well, look, we've got red light cameras in municipalities in Ontario, and you get a ticket in the mail from that. And those red light cameras have existed for many years. I don't think we're suggesting that people should blow through red lights, or suggesting that hey, around a school zone, maybe you shouldn't be going 50 and a 30, because that's just not a good idea in a residential neighborhood.
Would you, if the Liberals were to get back into power in the next election, which is something I assume you would like, do you see yourself bringing back these cameras if the Premier gets rid of them?
I think we've got to have that conversation. I'm not going to say yes or no. I don't know what 4 years from now looks like. The Premier said at his announcement he wants to put in these roundabouts. Well, roundabouts are going to cost millions of dollars. I don't know if they're going to front the bill to put in roundabouts in all of these areas or the other speed enforcement measures. So I think it's something that any future government, needs to have a conversation about. They need to have that honest conversation with voters. That's why I want to have this honest conversation right now, because I get a lot of people that are posting online, oh, it's a cash grab, it's bad. Some of those same folks, are not, they're against property taxes going up. So are we going to put more officers in school zones? Because what's going to happen is folks are going to contact their counselor. They're going to contact the mayor. They're going to complain and ask for the police to come to whatever school it is. And either the police are going to be able to, or more likely than not, probably not going to be able to come. And then folks are going to be upset in that neighborhood. We're almost making it like okay to break the law. I don't think that's a good thing in our society. We may not agree with all the laws, and I think that's why we need to have some of these conversations. Where some of these speed cameras are in place, I agree they shouldn't be there. The speed camera is given 70,000 tickets a year, I think was one of the cases. Sounds like we've got a different problem going on than just a speed camera.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up as well, because the unfairness, I think, is compound. You've got the fine, which is very arbitrary, and also the fact that you can't fight it. Do you think someone who gets a ticket from one of these speed enforcement cameras should be able to confront their accuser and have their day in court? Because right now they don't really have that option.
If you're setting the limit, let's say it's 10 kilometers over and you're not going to get a ticket under then, there are processes to be able to appeal that through the administrative penalty system. There still is a process to be able to do that. We've seen most municipalities move to that approach, I think, which is a good approach because we're seeing our court system tied up. I think yesterday there was an article in the Toronto Star about somebody who got hit by a car while they're riding their bike. Then they ended up, under the streetcar essentially. And that driver who got the ticket there, that got thrown out of court because the court system's so jammed up. So the automated penalty system actually works quite well, I think, in these very minor situations to deal with these kinds of offenses. It's pretty clear. Were you going 10 over or not? The camera's calibrated. It's there. It's pretty straightforward at the end of the day.
Well, I think part of the problem here, Rob, is that it varies from municipality to municipality. Yep. And whereas you may start your day in Burlington, you may end your day in Toronto, and they could have different limits. And that's very offside of what people have always known as drivers, that the cops always going to give you about 10 kilometers grace. They're not going to pull you over for 10 over. But some of these machines are ticketing people for that. And if people know what the threshold is, then maybe they're less likely to get a ticket or speed in the first place. But there's not a consistent playing field province-wide.
I'm with you. There should be a consistent playing field, and that's my message to the premier. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Make the system work, make it be fair, because I think that's quite reasonable. You're 10 over. I don't, maybe you shouldn't get a ticket. Don't necessarily want you going 10 over the limit. I know when I drive, I think we all go over the limit every now and then. And Waze tells me school zone ahead, speed camera ahead. And I say, oh, wait, you know what? I better slow down. But it then reminds me when I see the sign for a school zone somewhere else, well, maybe I should actually slow down a little bit as well. It's a good reminder for us sometimes.
Okay. What about some of the other measures that the premier is proposing? I mean, he's saying circles and flashing lights and those signs that tell you exactly how fast you're going, things like that. Is there a place for more of that as well?
I
And
think there is a place for more of that. And in these school zones, like let's not kid ourselves. There are signs right now that say school zone, speed camera coming up. It's not, right then and there. Actually, when the officer's hiding around the hedge, right, or behind their cop car, there is no warning sign. They're going to get you with the radar gun and you don't see them coming necessarily. When you're going through the school zone and there's a speed camera, you know that it's coming up there unless you're not watching the road. Maybe we should be watching the road better. I just, again, I don't think we should be normalizing, oh, it's okay. We're all just going to, break the law. And we see folks going 50 over, even more over. That's not okay. I think we've got to bring down the speeds in those school zones. And to your point around, flashing lights, sure, flashing lights are great. But if people aren't following, what's there right now, are they going to follow that flashing light? I'm not exactly sure. Roundabouts, I think roundabouts are a great solution in a lot of areas because it requires you to slow down as you go into the intersection. They're going to cost millions of dollars. Who's going to be paying for that? The taxpayer at the end of the day as well, right? So, over time, should we be redoing our roads? 100%. But to say, oh, we're just going to, put a little bit of money for roundabouts, that's not going to fix the issue of people speeding in school zones.
was there a serious issue? Because it seems like this kind of came out of nowhere. And I hear a lot of statistics out of Toronto. And I think everyone would agree Toronto's got a different set of issues than the rest of the province. Was there a lot of kids getting hit by cars or things like that that said, wow, we really need to slow people down? Or is this just a general feeling that slower is better?
I think it's a mixture of everything. And I did a Google search before coming on just to see in the last year, what incidents have taken place. So in St. Thomas, Ontario, in southwestern Ontario on September 5th, child was hit in the school zone. Thankfully, okay. In Mississauga on May 26th, teen struck by vehicle outside a school, rushed to hospital. That one looked pretty serious. We saw in Temiskaming Shores, somewhere really far away, not necessarily in a school zone, but getting on a school bus of a driver blasting right by there. Now, this is in a rural community, child hit, very seriously injured. I think we want to avoid a lot of those situations. I think my message to everybody is when you see a school bus, stop, let it go. When you're in a school zone, slow down. Hopefully, this is the reminder for everyone. The enforcement aspect, I think, is an important piece, but I agree overall, we've got to redesign our road system to work better. I was driving in a neighborhood the other day, and it was in Etobicoke, and they had, a little bit of bump outs here and there. The road was a little narrower. It made me slow down, and it made me be aware of my surroundings because I don't want to hit that post that's bumped out a little bit more. So it's a great conversation, and we should be doing more of that 100%.
Rob, I noticed though that when you were giving your examples, you didn't give me any from your area, but you did say you've got speed enforcement cameras. So what was the need in Ajax?
Well, I hear it all the time when I'm knocking on doors around schools or on, some of the streets in neighborhoods. They're not an arterial road, but there's kind of the street that people come, get in and out. Sometimes you've got a school on that road. I hear quite a bit from those folks that are concerned about having their kids play in their front yard because kids are going to dart out. They're going to chase the ball, whatever it might be. So I hear it quite a bit. I hear it from school communities as well. So it's something that is real and it's something that's out there. And thankfully, there hasn't been an incident that we've seen reported. But at the end of the day, we've got to slow down in school zones. Our municipal councilors, they love this. And they love it because they hear from their residents who ask them for that speed enforcement camera outside their school.
Okay. All right. And I also understand though the counselors also like this because it is a good form of revenue for them. I mean, they're making a
Well,
lot of money off of this.
not everywhere. So in Ajax, there's been no net profit to the town.
Hmm.
They literally use it and they move it around. So that's why my message again to the premier is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Come up with regulations to make it work, that understands some of the investment that municipalities put in, millions of dollars of our tax dollars in whichever municipality it is, and make the system work better to be more fair. I think that's a good thing at the end of the day.
Do you think if the province created a blanket set of rules, time of use, thresholds for how fast somebody can go, do you think that if the province sets out the framework and specifies they can only be used in community safety zones, the mayors would accept that? Or are they just going to push back against the premier no matter what?
I mean, I would say to those mayors, you should accept that at the end of the day. Let's be reasonable. Let's make good decisions. And if you do get some revenue from this, it should be directed towards transportation safety improvements, not going into general revenue.
Okay. One last question on this particular topic is, what responsibility do pedestrians have in all of this? I mean, if there's a crisis happening here, or we really need to slow people down because of near misses or actual collisions,
Yeah.
I mean, cars weren't driving on the sidewalk. So clearly this was someone on the road. How do we overcome that so that everybody is going toward the same goal?
Road safety is everyone's responsibility. Now, if you're, a 5-year-old kid or a 6-year-old kid, it's a little bit more different, than somebody who's, 18 and not looking both ways when they cross the street, right? So I think there is a bit of a distinction there. And that's why there's been such of a focus here in Ajax and other places around school zones. We know now that folks are using those e-scooters. Going around. And we know there's been a huge uptick in ER visits by folks using those e-scooters because they're using them on sidewalks. They're using them in places that maybe you shouldn't be using them, and drivers aren't looking for that as well. So at the end of the day, road safety really is everyone's responsibility. Drivers should slow down, be aware when you're in a school zone. It's common sense, right? When people are talking about a tax grab on a big arterial road, different story. School zone, let's keep our kids safe. Sick kids, they've been saying it's going to help keep our kids safe. Municipalities are saying that. The chiefs of police are supporting the use of speed cameras in these areas as well, because it means their officers can go after the bad guys. They can go after the criminals, as opposed to having to be deployed to a school zone to ticket drivers.
Okay. All right. Listen, I thought this was a really good discussion, and I know we could probably go on and on for a while on this, but I think we've touched on all the big topics. Can I ask you two more questions before you go?
Sure, why not?
Okay. The legislature is getting set to resume. What's the number one priority for the Ontario Liberal Party?
It's going to be hold this government to account. There's a lot of waste going on in this province right now. The debt numbers are going through the roof. We're going to be a strong voice in the legislature to hold the premier and the government to account on the spending that they're doing, and ensuring and calling for them to spend resources in areas where it's going to make a difference, where it matters, as opposed to maybe some, well-connected friends, as we're seeing with the skills development program right now.
Okay, so an overall hold them to account, no specific priority like ER wait times or improving school functions or anything like that. It's just a general hold them to account.
In all of those areas, quite frankly, Scott, when we're seeing with this provincial government right now, every day there's something new that's going on. We want to have better decision making, more effective decision making that's going to respond to communities. There's a lot going on with schools and school boards right now. Our education critic, John Fraser, was traveling the province doing a local matters in education tour, listening to school communities, listening to parents, listening to teachers about what they need. And what we've heard is we've got to have about $1 billion more in special education to help resolve the violent incidents in schools, to help resolve some of the other challenges. Healthcare's it is in crisis. People still don't have a family doctor. I've received multiple messages the last couple of days about the hospital in my community at the Ajax Pickering Hospital that the Minister of Finance shares, because he's next door in Pickering, about long wait times at that hospital. So we're going to be holding the government to account on all of those issues. There isn't really just one, and we need to see a jobs plan as well. We know industries and manufacturers in the Southwest are shutting down. We don't have a real plan from the premier. We don't have a real plan from the government to really protect those industries. It's more than just pouring out a bottle of Crown Royal.
Yeah, well said. You said something that I thought was just fascinating. You said two words that I don't often hear liberals use: common sense. Now, that is almost a bit of a conservative dog whistle, if you will.
You might say that, but speed cameras used reasonably, I think, is common sense. spending, money for training and education on where it's going to be effective instead of maybe, people associated with a nightclub owner. I think that's common sense. At the end of the day, this is a new kind of Ontario Liberal Party, and we're approaching these issues differently because we're in our communities and we listen to what's going on. We want government to work. It should work well, and it should work for you.
Any leadership aspirations? I know you'll be looking for a new leader very soon.
I am seriously considering it. I've been encouraged by some past candidates, past MPPs, and other folks in the party. I'm considering it. I think it's still a long road to go, but I'm having those conversations. I'm listening, and the conversations are definitely encouraging. We need some more common sense in this province, Scott.
Well said. All right, Rob, thank you so much for your time. It was great to have this conversation. And I think for the audience to be able to hear someone who's in favor of these cameras explain it the way you did, I don't know if you've changed any minds, but I certainly appreciate the discussion. So thank you very much.
Do I? And I think in our political system, we need to have this kind of healthy discourse. You see a lot of name calling sometimes online, and a lot of rude words and swear words and stuff like that. Being able to have a conversation and understand each other's opinion, I think, is a good thing. We need more of that. There isn't enough of that in the legislature. To be honest with you, hopefully the premier will heed our advice. Not quite sure if they will, but we're going to come up with solutions and also be critical when we need to be critical. But that doesn't mean be critical all the time.
Well said. This is quite refreshing. Rob, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this, and I know the audience does as well.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Happy to be back.